here this morning for the Create Spaces Toolkit training. And if you could take a minute to rename yourself with your name and your organization, we would appreciate that. And we'll be getting started shortly. We are ready to get started. Thank you all again so much for being here with us this morning, and welcome to the Creative Spaces Toolkit training. ArtsFairfax has been working on the Creative Spaces Toolkit for the past 2 years, and we are so grateful to all the artists, arts organizations, property owners, consultants, county staff, and our board members that helped with this project. My name is Lisa Merriam, and I'm the Director of Grants and Services at ArtsFairfax. And before we get started, please double check that your microphone is muted. And if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat or save them until the Q&A session later in today's program. We also have live closed captioning available that you can turn on by clicking the up arrow next to the closed captioning and selecting Show Subtitle. At this time, please also rename yourself if you haven't already with your name and your organization. And we wanted to let you know that we are recording today's webinar, and it will be posted on our website along with the PowerPoint presentation. I'd also like to thank Alex Smith of Projection, who's providing the technology for today's presentation. And if you have any technical issues, please contact Gafar Sharif, my colleague, whose information is in the chat, email or phone number. And I would now like to introduce our President and CEO, Linda Sullivan.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As Lisa mentioned, this has been a project we've been working with for a couple of years. As the local arts agency or the service organization for Fairfax County, we provide grant funds, but we also advocate for arts funding and for supportive policies. And we do a number of services where we think it will really push the opportunity for the arts to reach more people and to grow the arts. And so one of the things we realized long before COVID was that Fairfax County is somewhat short in terms of cultural infrastructure. We've got a number of exciting facilities on the way or in planning, but there's also a need for temporary spaces, pop-up, support spaces. We have a lot of space needs in the county. So we have been working on this toolkit as a first step to help people sort of think about what is needed in terms of using alternative spaces and helping the landowners to think about how they can help get the arts to activate their spaces. And we've worked with the county, and they've been very supportive in terms of really looking at the zoning and all the things that have to be considered. So this has really been a big project for us. We're excited about it. I want to congratulate Lisa Merriam, who spearheaded this whole project. And she's been working with HGA and Ann Corbett and the county and other folks. So we're rolling it out here with you all, and we are really interested in the questions you'll have. And it'll help us sort of continue to refine this toolkit as we go forward. So special thanks to Ann Corbett and Michelle and Jennifer. Thank you for being our presenters today. And I think this is going to be very informative. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Linda. This is our team at ArtsFairfax, and this project wouldn't have been possible without everyone here. And I want to acknowledge them as well. And now introduce you to our presenters for today. Ann Corbett. Ann, with Building Creative, has consulting experience that includes multifaceted experience in urban planning, economic development, and creative placemaking. Ann provides a unique perspective and skill set to connect the creative economy and real estate development. And Ann, as we mentioned earlier, has served as a consultant on the Creative Spaces Toolkit for the past 2 years. And I'd also like to introduce Michele LeTorneur. Michele is an interior architect with almost 30 years experience in the DC area with cultural art and nonprofits. And we are so fortunate to have Jennifer Josiah, nonprofit and places of worship coordinator with Fairfax County Land Development Services, with us today for the Q&A portion of the training. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ann and Michele.
Good morning. Great to be here. I feel like I'm on AM Chicago with my friend Michele. So, and suddenly I am a little bit self-conscious, so I hope you'll bear with us.
We've had like a year and a half of Zoom and not in person.
We've had a year and a half of Zoom, and we've never sat next to each other while we've been on a Zoom call. So, yeah. So what we would like to do today is give you a quick introduction to the Creative Spaces Toolkit. And if you want to go ahead and bring my screen up, Alex, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna give you a quick overview of the toolkit. I'm gonna hit some of the highlights. Then we're gonna take a break. Then we're gonna let Michele talk about doing the quickest, cheapest, easiest way to get interim space up and running for an arts organization in Fairfax County.
I see a comment that we're a little too quiet. Can we make sure everyone can hear us before we continue? You can let us know in the chat if you can hear us just fine.
I see a nodding head. Thank you for nodding.
Okay.
And by the way, I appreciate the people who are on camera. I understand why you don't want to be on camera. But those of you who are, thank you for nodding and smiling and giving us a little feedback. Because again, we're just staring at
some names.
We're staring. Yeah.
I have great appreciation for my kids' teachers in the past year and a half.
God bless them. Okay, so we're going to do an overview of the toolkit. Then we're going to take a break. Then I'm going to ask Michele to walk you through what we're calling the easy button. How do you get a pop-up up and running as quickly and cheaply as possible? And then we're going to open it up to questions and engage Jennifer Josiah in the conversation. So let's start with the toolkit. And Michele, of course, feel free to jump in and ask me questions.
Oh, I will.
If you haven't had a chance, by the way, the toolkit is on the ArtsFairfax website. I would encourage you to download it. In fact, I probably should have said that. Probably the best way to enjoy this workshop this morning would be to go ahead and download the PDF so that you can make notes in your toolkit as we go along. Yeah, so I'm going right to page 6, which is planning. So you've decided you want to do an art space. Yikes. What do you need to do first? I really want you to focus on 2 things. I want you to give someone the role of project leadership. Someone in your organization needs to own this project. It needs to be part of their job description. And if their job description is already full, then it's going to be really difficult for them to manage a space planning project in addition to the rest of their responsibilities. So the first thing is to think about your human capital and what human resources you have to dedicate to this effort, because while, again, Michelle's going to talk about a quick and easy, somebody still has to run point. And ideally, that's someone with good organizational and project management skills who isn't afraid to roll up their sleeves and do a lot of hunting around crummy buildings and websites.
Yeah, and from my point of view, from the interior design point of view, as someone who's doing this for you, having someone who is not focused on this for your project is a detriment. You want somebody who is really focused on this, or if it's if they only have 1 hour a week to work on it, it'll show. So it really needs to be.
Well, it'll just take longer.
Yeah, it really needs to be kind of a dedicated personnel for that project, for that process. They can see the PDF, correct?
Yes, they can. So the second thing is to establish goals and objectives for your effort. Why are you doing this? If the leader and everyone on the team doesn't have a short list of reasons for being, this project will flounder, and it will make it difficult to make decisions in a timely manner so that you can get up and running quickly. So decide what it is you're trying to accomplish right from jump. And each time you hit a decision-making point, come back to those objectives. Make decisions objectively. I'm being redundant. Once upon a time, a board member of mine said, don't fall in love with a building. Don't fall in love with this project. Don't let your emotions sway you in a real estate development effort. Go back to your clearly agreed on objectives.
Oh, so Lisa sent me a comment, explain what my job is. So as an interior designer, interior architect, I'm in charge of taking a space from beginning to end. So there is a building that has concrete floor, columns, walls, and I work with an arts organization, a nonprofit, a for-profit space, and meet with the client. What are your needs? What are qualitative, quantitative, how many, whatever. And then meet with you, design the space, bring in the engineer, bring in the contractor, do all the plans, get the plans permitted through Fairfax County or in other jurisdictions, manage the process of getting it built, do the furniture, do the finishes, so on and so forth, and then get the project built. So basically kind of a soup to nuts. So hopefully that explains kind of why, on my perspective, it's important for an arts organization to have someone focused on it. Because you're the liaison for your space. I'm the liaison to get it built for you. And hopefully that answers Lisa's question for why I'm here.
I would say it's like the relationship between the artistic director and the director of a particular play. So you need a director of the particular play, and you need staff oversight to set the objectives for the director to execute for the organization.
I'm the one who designs and gets your space built. whether or not it's an art gallery, office, performance art space.
Okay, so you'll notice that the toolkit has hyperlinks in it. What I have done is I have clicked on the link on page 6 that says see space specifications, and that's jumped me to page 27 in the appendix. Page 27 is meant to help you think about all of the parameters that the space needs to have to serve your artistic activity. I'm not going to go through this in detail. Hopefully most of it's self-explanatory. But the point is that if you take time with page 37 and have answers to all of these questions before you start looking, you will do a much better job of finding spaces that fit your needs. How do I go back?
Or scroll.
Ooh.
It's a big book.
It's a big book.
It's got a lot of stuff in it. Trust me, I've read it.
It's a big book. So now I'm on page 7, finding space. So you've determined who's running your project, you've determined what it is you're looking for, and now you're going to start looking at spaces. How do you do that? It's really overwhelming. Here at the top of page 8 are some 5 keys to success that I want you to have in mind as you're looking for space. I want you to think about being in a cluster of other arts, retail, and like-minded uses. You don't want to be on an island. You want to be among friends. Second, I want you to look for conforming uses. I want you to look for spaces that have previously been used for something similar. And I realize that that's going to feel like a stretch, and later when Michelle talks, we're going to talk about what that means in terms of conforming use. But you can't try to turn an apartment into a performance space.
You don't want to go into a gas station. You don't want to turn a gas station into an art gallery. As much as that might sound awesome, don't do it.
There's a really great example of that.
There's many great examples, but it's a headache. Greenfield issues.
It's certainly not quick and easy.
It is not quick and easy.
Okay, so sticking with the quick and easy. Third, look for persistent vacancies. Look for stuff that's been vacant for a while. Why? Because probably that landlord is going to be
Very motivated.
motivated to fill it. Exactly.
Or it's been vacant for a while for a reason. So you got
Well, that's true too.
Be careful.
Right, it could be a lemon.
Yeah.
4, I want you to cultivate relationships. So typically the best art space development relationships come with landlords or developers that are in your sphere of influence, are in your circle of friends, kind of like LinkedIn. They're at least a second degree of relationship to you, your board members, your staff members, audience members, donors, etc. Look for friends of friends. Cold relationships with arts uses take a long time to develop. Lastly, I want you, well, related to that, you're going to try to leverage an existing relationship. Think about who you're already working with in terms of real estate. Maybe you already have office space and that landlord could have other vacant space. Maybe you already have other rental storage space. Maybe you have a relationship with a restaurant or a supplier that provides you with things you regularly buy. Go ask them. So leverage existing relationships with people that already trust you, so that when you tell them you want to do this pop-up arts thing, they trust you, they believe you, they feel comfortable and confident.
We recognize that you may know some of this information already, but in a way, this toolkit is kind of a great equalizer. You may have built out a space once, you may have built out a space 5 times, you may have never built out a space. So this is we're really.
Or if you've built out a space, you never want to build out a space
ever again. So so I understand that you may know some of this stuff, or some of this may seem basic, but in a way, we're really trying to make sure that everyone is on the same playing field. So,
right.
Anyway, some of this may seem basic, but it really is just to make sure that you understand kind of all the pieces and parts of finding and building a space.
So now I'm going to actually jump to page 12. I'm going to jump to page 12. There I am. Zoning and permits. So again, Michelle's
Everyone's favorite part of this section.
So you can find vacant spaces, you can find persistent vacancies with people you already know, and those can be great, but if they don't meet that conforming use criteria, that was point number 1 or 2, you're not going to be able to do it quickly, cheaply, legally. Oh, that's the word I forgot.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more, but
Quickly, cheaply, legally. I wrote it on a.
yeah, we will never recommend you squatting in a space without a permit.
So we're going to go into more details later, but what's most important is here at the bottom. The quickest path to approval is when the desired activity conforms with the building code use group identified on the existing certificate of occupancy. What you're doing needs to conform with what used to be there. Does that mean it's exactly? No, it needs to conform, and again, we're going to talk about what that means so that you don't get hung up in a lot of permitting and building code modification, construction costs, and headaches, and time and money. If it doesn't conform, it will cost you time and money, and therefore you can't really pop up.
So yeah, again, it's if you're looking to be an art gallery, you want to find a space that can be an art gallery, right? You don't want to find a space that was a gas station. You don't want to find a space that was a car repair. Can you do that? Absolutely. Will it take you more time, more money, more permits? Yes. So we're always coming at this from, let's not spend more time, more money if you don't have to. So we're always going to be coming from that aspect of, let's find a space that's already working for you.
Okay, so now I'm going back to page 9. You've identified a person, you've set your goals and objectives, you've found a space, you think it conforms, and now you're talking to the landlord about a lease. This section highlights some of the key terms that you need to consider in that agreement with the landlord. And by the way, if you're doing a short-term occupancy, you may want something less complicated than a typical lease. You may want, there's often what's called a license agreement, which is basically I'm giving you the license to use my space for this period of time.
Also, it's sometimes called a work agreement, depending on the terminology the landlord uses.
Or a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement. Regardless of what you call it, regardless of the complexity of it, as an arts organization, we highlighted several key terms that you want to make sure you're familiar with before you get into that relationship. And I'm going to cover just a few of these right now. The first one, which I think it's in alphabetical order, but happens to me to be the most important, is artistic content. You want to make sure that you and the landlord have a clear understanding about how the development of your artistic content is going to go. That doesn't mean that there isn't room for negotiation, but if you don't talk about it early and often, you run the risk of misunderstanding each other. If the landlord really wants family friendly, then you need to be down with that. If you really want to do something that pushes the contemporary art envelope that may make people uncomfortable, you need to make sure the landlord understands that's your intent.
You're a theater below a residence, or performing arts space below a residence, and you're going to be making noise at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday.
Sure, yes.
Yeah. I'm married to an acoustical engineer, so it's always popping into my brain. Yeah.
Got it. The second thing is the condition of the space. Basically, you want to make sure that you and the landlord understand the condition you're taking it in, so that you have as few surprises in terms of the condition of the space. Next page, indemnification. That means hold harmless. Typically, you're going to need to hold your landlord harmless, as in it's not his or her fault if someone slips and falls in your visual art exhibit. It's not his or her fault if someone gets COVID. It's, and by the way, the toolkit also includes a sample COVID waiver, which, as you can imagine, is something that is critical these days. So you should be expected to take full responsibility for everything that's happening in the space once you take occupancy. Whether that's, a hammer hits somebody's finger and, they end up in the hospital for a broken finger, you got to take responsibility for that. You got to take responsibility for all of your patrons' health and welfare, which leads to the next point, which is insurance. I'm sure as thoughtful, responsible arts organizations, you all have directors and operators, directors and officers insurance already. You probably have some liability insurance already. You need to go back to your carrier, to your insurance agent, and add this space to your insurance policy, and you need to discuss with them the terms of what you're doing so that you can ensure that your insurance covers that. And by the way, don't be scared by that. Typically, liability insurance for a short-term program is not that expensive. What's really expensive is when somebody sues you because you didn't have the coverage that you need. So get out in front of liability. A few other things here. Are there property taxes? You're like, well, I'm a nonprofit. I'm not responsible for property taxes. Except that the property taxes go to the owner, and often owners expect to pass through property taxes to their tenants, regardless of their tenants' nonprofit status, because the property owner is still liable for those taxes. So bring that up. What's the tenure? As in, how long do you plan to be there? How long do you need to be there before you get up and running? How long will it take you to clean up and close up shop when you're done? Make sure that you've discussed that timeline and the termination process. How will this lease end? What do I need to do? If I paint a mural all over the walls, does the landlord care? Do I need to paint it back? Can I demo it and he won't care because he's gonna totally renovate it later? Ask those questions early. Utilities can be really expensive. Don't underestimate what an electricity or a water bill costs. Visibility, that's another good one, which relates to signage. You want to make sure that your patrons can find you. You want to make sure that you have visibility to drive-by traffic. If those are key considerations for you, you need to discuss those with the landlord early and often. There may be signage limitations by the county, by the community where the space is, etc. So again, ask those questions early. All right, that is leases and agreements. now I am going to jump to, I am not going in the right direction. Oh, this is good. There's also a great list in here of important contacts. All these people know we put them in here, so call them, email them early and often. We included a glossary. There's lots of words, there's lots of jargon in real estate that you want to familiarize yourself with. And at the very least, when your landlord gives you a lease, hopefully some of those words that you might not understand are here in this glossary. It goes both ways though. Notice that there's some arts definitions in here. Remember that not everybody in the regular world, if you will, knows what a rehearsal studio means. Not everybody knows what performance art means. And as we all know, different artistic forms mean different things to all of us as creatives. So make sure you're explaining yourself and ask questions when you don't understand the terms that other folks are using. All right. I have one last topic to cover. This is a good one. Everybody's favorite, the money. So we have a budget worksheet in here, and one of the things that I'm hoping will happen soon is that we will actually put this on the ArtsFairfax website in a spreadsheet format so that you can download it and fill it in and not need to recreate the wheel here. This budget is meant to cover, is meant to be comprehensive, okay? So this toolkit is meant to be comprehensive. Doesn't necessarily mean that all of these things should be included in a quickie pop-up, I'm gonna do a 2-week gallery show. However, hopefully this exposes you to all the different considerations as you plan, and it's better that we include everything and you can then say, oh, I don't need that. Awesome, move on. So first is income. So a project budget is different from an operating budget in that there may be very different kinds of sources of income than what you're typically using. A project budget is static, whereas you may be used to your operating budget, which is dynamic over time, say over a calendar year or your fiscal year. A project budget is a snapshot of the entire project, which may take a month, may take 10 years. And so there's different sources and uses than what you would find in a typical operating budget. So at the top we have a list of some of those different kinds of income that you might use for a capital project. I want to call out specifically, you may have a capital reserve fund. In fact, part of planning for a facilities project would be learning to budget for reserves, learning to sock away a little bit of the leftovers every single month or every single year so that someday you can build your dream space. Someday you can afford to hire Michelle to design your dream space because you have saved reserves. So notice that's a capital reserve fund, not an operating reserve fund. Those are two different things. Next, you may at some point choose to wage a capital campaign. That's a whole nother seminar, that's a whole nother day. Not even gonna touch that.
That's a whole nother workbook.
That's a whole nother workbook. Hopefully, that's a workbook you already have. Or, yeah. You may find corporations or foundations that like to give capital grants. Capital grants can be attractive because they're one-time grants versus general operating support, where the donor expects that you're going to come back every year. Some donors only like to give one-time grants. Loans. Yeesh. Sometimes to get a new facility, just like when you bought a house or bought a condo, or someone you know bought a house or bought a condo, you got a mortgage. So developing a space long-term often involves a mortgage. Lastly, I'm going to highlight tenant improvement allowance. This is an exciting one that sometimes makes people happier. They think it's more exciting than it actually is, right? Because a tenant improvement allowance is money that's typically provided by the landlord to help you build your space out.
But they put a lot of restrictions on it. So it's not as exciting as it sounds.
It's not as exciting as it sounds. And they rarely write you a check. Typically what they do is they say, we have a construction company on site, we'll build it, and we'll pay for a certain amount of that, and then you have to pay for the rest, and you have to use their construction company, and maybe you even have to use their architect. And
Or from a short list, or, I mean, yeah, there's lots of stipulations. So you have to get that, like Anne was saying in the beginning, you have to kind of get all their information up front. Is there a list? Are there requirements? Am I allowed to use furniture in that TI? Am I allowed to use cabling in that TI? And all that typically is stipulated in the lease or in the work agreement.
Right. And
Yeah.
again, she said TI because that's how people talk about it.
Tenant improvement.
They talk about TIs. Ooh, I'm going to get $50 a square foot in TIs.
Lots of jargon.
And that sounds exciting. $50 a square foot in TIs.
Does not go a long way.
It does not go a long way. Right. And sometimes it's a rent abatement.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the TI is delivered. Meaning, again, they don't write you a check.
They
What-
just give it to you in free
They
rent.
just deduct it from your rent over time.
Which means you then need to get a loan. I mean, again, a whole separate conversation that's not for today. What we're trying to let you know is that you need people. You need a team. You need people to help you with this. This is not something that is expected that you need to know all of this, because
Right.
why would you?
Okay, so that's income. Let's now run through expenses. Generally, in capital projects, we talk about expenses in two ways: hard costs and soft costs. Hard costs are things you can touch. Furniture is a hard cost. Paint, walls, HVAC systems, lighting fixtures, the computers, equipment, all of that are things you can touch. Those are hard costs. Soft costs are therefore things that you generally cannot touch. They're temporal things. So in your construction costs, you're going to build a budget of all of the construction you have to do, all of the furniture, fixtures, and equipment you need to buy. Then I called out specifically IT, phone, and security because a lot of people overlook that. And in today's world, if you don't have a savvy IT and security system,
Yeah.
if you forget those things, you're struggling. And then I called out signage. A lot of times people forget, oh my gosh, I have to spend $10,000 on a sign, and I totally forgot about that. Again, back to the conversation before, visibility is important. Don't forget about signage. Then there's maybe specialty equipment, lighting, dance floor, etc. Sometimes your specialty equipment is things that you are buying separately, which is again why I put it out here. Typically, a general contractor who bids to build out your space has no clue what specs you need for a dance floor, for instance. So that's generally excluded from your general contractor's activities, and you're going to contract for that separately with a specialty company that knows how to do that. General conditions and fees. That is the cost of doing business with your contractor. So if it costs $100,000 to build out the space, your GC, your general contractor, may then add on 3, 5, even 10% in general conditions and fees to manage your project. Partly that's his management time, partly that's his profit. You can negotiate those general conditions and fees, but I don't want you to be surprised about that. Okay, that's hard costs. Now let's talk a little bit about soft costs. Did you notice that I put acoustical engineer?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, I've given like 8-hour lectures just on budgeting, so this is a tough subject.
So soft costs, again, are all the things that you need, services that you need, policies, permits, etc., but you can't touch. You need all kinds of professionals to make sure that the space you develop is done well and done right.
You gotta pay a lot of consultants.
You gotta pay a lot of consultants.
It is what it is.
And for performing arts especially, acoustics are important. It's important that the sound in the room is effective. It's important that the sound doesn't leak out of the room and torture your neighbors. It's important that you can do recordings if that's what you need to do. Could be wet, could be dry. It's really tragic if you build yourself a performance space and your audience can't hear it well, or can't hear it as you intend it to be heard.
Good part of my husband's business.
Yes, so we can give you Gary's card later. Obviously, you may need an architect and interior design fees. It may cost you money to run a capital campaign. Raising money costs money. You probably need to hire a campaign consultant. You probably need to design a new section of your website. You probably need to print brochures. You probably need to do mailings. To raise money, you're going to have to spend money. Engineering fees. Just like you need an acoustical engineer, you need engineers that help you with a lighting grid. If you're going to hang a lighting grid, you need a structural engineer, because you need to know that if you hang that grid, the building isn't going to fall down.
You need mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
You need mechanical and electrical and plumbing so that your air conditioning is effective, so that your toilets flush when you flush them.
That you're up to code, frankly.
That you're up to code, right. And for instance, so that if you're a visual art organization and you're disposing of chemicals and materials, like how are you doing that? Where is that happening? Hopefully you're not just flushing those things. You may have financing fees, as in I'm getting a loan and there's fees associated with getting a loan. Whether that's interest, whether that's an origination fee, whether that's document fees, a title company, there's closing costs on a loan. Whether it's a construction loan or a mortgage, there's going to be financing fees. Graphic design, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Insurance, I mentioned that earlier. You want to call your agent early and let them know what your intentions are and get ahead of how your insurance needs might change. Legal and accounting, don't forget that you need a lawyer to help you with that lease. You need your auditors to get a heads up, or your accounting firm to get a heads up about the new expenses that you're planning for and the new project income, hopefully, how will that impact you? More soft costs, lighting and sound design. I think that's probably self-explanatory to most folks. Marketing and advertising. If you move or open a space, you have to tell people about it. And you can't just tell people about it on Facebook. You have to think really comprehensively about how you're going to communicate the program, project, new building, new location, so that people can hear about your programs and so that people can find you.
Plus, you might need new business cards, depending on whether that's
at
some point.
You might want new business cards.
If you're still doing that.
If you're still doing
I mean, are we still doing that? I don't know.
Yeah, right?
Business cards?
Okay. Can you tell I'm looking far away and I'm squinting? All right, what's left? Moving costs, right. Permit expediter. By the way, you may need to pay people to make things run smoothly. That's what a permit expediter, that's somebody who just specializes in that compliance process with your jurisdiction.
You want that. You want that.
Project management, we discussed that. We discussed architecture and design costs. Storage. Oh, storage. Don't forget that in the process of moving, in the process of designing new space, you may need to store new furniture that you got donated and somebody wanted you to pick it up now, but your space isn't ready yet, so you got to put it in storage.
Most furniture companies, when you buy furniture, they'll give you 30 days free storage, but let's say you have a hiccup and all of a sudden your project is delayed for some reason and now you ordered your furniture on time because you were smart, but then something happened with your project and now you're delayed and you need to now put your furniture in storage, so now you have furniture storage fees.
Yeah.
It happens.
I think we all know, like, you can never have enough closet space, right? So think about that early and often. Okay, that pretty much covers the capital budget component. The other thing that's in here is the operating budget. Now, I'm not going to walk through it in specifics like I did with the capital budget. However, the main point here is that your operating budget is going to evolve when you take on new programs or new space, new activities. Don't assume that your operating budget with your 1,000 square foot tiny gallery space that you've now shifted to a 2,500 square foot gallery space is going to be the same. Your utilities are going to go up, your staffing needs are going to go up, your insurance will go up, your supply budget will probably go up. Every single thing that you are doing today in your annual operating budget will likely evolve when you go from the old house to the new house. So the important point here is to plan for that before you get into the new house. If you've heard the term house poor, you don't want to build your dream house, move in, and then be house poor because you can't afford furniture, because you can't afford the programming in it, because now the production costs in my new facility are twice what they were in my old facility, because my new facility communicates a completely different artistic expectation to my audience than the garage I was in. I remember actually Signature Theater in Arlington having a huge conversation about this, going from that, I mean, Michelle keeps joking about not being in a garage. Signature is sort of a classic example of a local Virginia theater company that was in a garage and then built a fabulous new space. And it was a really big deal to think about how their audience went in with low expectations when they stepped through puddles and oil spills to get into a garage, they don't expect much. They get pleasantly surprised. Then when they walk
Arlington is
into
not Fairfax County, and
You're
that's all
right.
that's all I can say.
but my point is that when you leave the old house and when your patrons, your audience members leave the old house and walk into the new house, they have a completely different expectation. And so your production costs will need to evolve accordingly. Okay, so that is the highlights of the
That's the highlights of a how many page?
of a
Very
40
comprehensive, thorough workbook that you guys have been working on for 2 years. It's kind of amazing.
Right. So I think what we'd like to do now is
So we're at a scheduled break at 11, but I don't know whether or not you want to have any question and answers now about.
since we have a little time.
I'm kind of going off script here,
I appreciate
but I mean,
that.
whether or not we want to lump all the questions together, or we want to answer any questions about the toolkit now, so that we're not confusing anybody later. Do we, Lisa? Lisa, is that okay? Do we want to ask any questions now about the toolkit?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the chat is still open and we can see that. And you can also unmute yourself and raise your hand if you have a question about any of the pages in the toolkit or anything that Michelle and I have covered so far.
Nothing better. Someone has to have a question. Anything about building space? Anything about finding space, building space?
We can.
Yeah, while we have it. If not, we can take a break and move on to pop-up space.
Okay, so I will add one thing then, since no one's screaming out. I want to go back to page 7 in this elected officials section. As we developed this toolkit, as I keep looking at the wrong camera, as we developed this toolkit, ArtsFairfax heard a lot from these awesome people down here, the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. The supervisors in your county crave great activation in the vacant space in their districts. So the reason we included this elected officials section here, like right up front, is we would highly encourage you to engage your local elected officials. One, they want arts uses as far as our conversations with them go, and two, they can be incredibly helpful in facilitating those strong relationships I mentioned at the top of the presentation. Now, that being said, when you go in to see an elected official, you need to have your act together. Have already done your space considerations page. Whoops. I'm trying to make the links work. Have this page, have all of this information succinctly organized in a one-page drop sheet that you can leave with that elected official. Not necessarily in this format. This is meant to just make sure A to Z you get through everything, but leave them with a snapshot of what you're trying to accomplish artistically, and then what specifications you're looking for. That will help them, help you, and it will make you look professional and competent, so that they feel confident in leveraging a relationship with a developer or a landlord to get you into space. Do I
See any questions?
still no questions?
So,
Linda has a question.
So it's sort of more of a comment.
Please.
I've got an echo going on here. I'm not sure. Sorry.
We don't hear an echo.
Okay, wonderful. The reason so important to do all of this advanced planning is, you have to decide whether the return is adequate. Are you going into space for a year and it's going to cost X? Or are you going into, do you need that space for 3 years or 5 years to make that investment, sort of work for you? So we can't underplay the advanced planning that this toolkit is talking about, because you need to know what kind of agreement you need to strike relative to how much it's going to cost you too. I just want to make that point. Thanks.
absolutely.
Yeah. Needless to say, Michelle and I are both planners.
Yeah,
And that's,
that's an understatement.
that's
My family jokes that I plan the 7 out of the next 3 vacations. So I'm
How do I get on that list? Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'm currently planning 2023. So let's do it.
Where are you going in 2023?
I don't know. I haven't done it yet. I'm working on it. Yeah. So proper planning is really the way to go, especially when it comes to space. I mean, building space is not something that really works out well to do randomly and just on a whim. Do you meet people where it works out? Absolutely. Do they usually have a lot of money and a lot of luck? Yeah.
A lot of karma.
Are a lot of us like that? No. I mean, so, unless if you're not that person, then, you need to plan it out. So.
Right. Okay. So, last call for questions on components or sections of the toolkit or requests.
Yeah, and if you don't think of a question now, but you think of one later, we definitely have some time later for question and answers. So this is not your last chance, but we thought while we had some time, and if not, we can take a
bio break.
We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the easy button. So
right. So we are going to start again.
There's a quick question. I'm going to jump off for a bit, and then we'll get back online. I saw this will be available online. Yes. So Lisa, do you want to chat about how this will be available online and when?
Yes. So we are going to be posting both the recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation on our website. And give us a little time to get that up, because it's a long webinar. We may be splitting it into chapters and doing some editing. So
Make me
check
look a little
back out
thinner.
in the week.
Maybe take some of the red out.
It will be, Michelle's going to, when Lisa's referring to the PowerPoint, that's what Michelle's going to do right after the break, is she's going to give a modest length PowerPoint, and that will probably be the quickest thing for ArtsFairfax to upload to the website, is that PowerPoint. It will have links embedded in it to walk you through doing a pop-up space. So if you're leaving now, that's what you'll want to come back to the website to get later.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not leaving now, this is why you want to go to the bathroom, get another cup of coffee, and come back. And we'll see you in 10 minutes.
You're in it. You're right there.
everybody, welcome back to AM Fairfax.
Was it
Good morning,
was it
Michelle.
Was it WKRP in Cincinnati? That's a radio.
That's showing your age, my friend.
I'm 50. It is what it is. Yeah.
Also, I now have croissant that Lisa gave me.
You're
in my
good.
tea.
Not good.
Hey everyone, I hope you got a ham and cheese croissant while you were away, because I did. Now I'm gonna.
Someone save the chocolate.
Now I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, and I'm going to try desperately not to ask questions in advance of each slide, as I like to do.
Let's get through the slide.
So our goal here, again, is to focus on interim space. The toolkit is meant to give you a comprehensive look at art space development, and that might be overwhelming, and or that just might not be what you're ready for. So we know that some of you would love to throw up a show in one of the many vacant spaces that have cropped up post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, whatever. So we're going to try to streamline this. We're going to try to streamline the process and talk to you about the one way. It feels like it's the one way. The one way
It's the easiest way, right? There's the simplest way, and then there's the small, medium, large, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the small way. Can it get more complicated than this? Sure. Can it get much more complicated than this? Sure. This is the easy button. This is the
it's probably copyrighted, the easy button.
This is I was gonna say Krispy Kreme donut. This is the plain donut, right? You can have a plain donut with some sprinkles, and then you can have a plain donut with some sprinkles and some chocolate icing. This is the plain donut, right?
Okay.
We're getting like, yeah,
Stop.
yeah.
Quickly, cheaply, legally. Quickly, cheaply, legally. That's our goal. Take it away, Michelle.
Right. So a year ago, when I was approached, the question was, how do we get a space temporarily in Fairfax County? And my response was, there is no such thing as a temporary space in Fairfax County. Fairfax County, rightly so, does not care whether or not you're in a space for a day or 10 years, because they want to make sure that you're in a space that is going to be legal, which means that you're in a space that is safe and code compliant, which is the whole kind of premise of this presentation, is that you're in a space that is, you're in there legally, you're in there, it meets code, it meets egress, all those things. So that's why
God forbid there's a fire, everyone can get out.
Everyone can get out. You have a space that someone in a wheelchair can access. You're in a space that someone in a wheelchair can use the restroom. You're in a space that someone who is hard of hearing can see strobes if there's a fire alarm. So all of the things that go into a building permit to make a space legal is what we're talking about here. So that's why you'll hear us use the word pop-up, and that's not a legal term. It's not something that you will see in any sort of literature, which is why easy button, pop-up, we're kind of using that. Interim space, this is because there's no legal kind of definition for that, but this is a legal method that we're talking about today, but it's about what can you do if you want to activate a space for a month or for a weekend. I mean, you're gonna be doing a lot of work for a weekend. You sure you wanna do that? Totally your call. But let's say you want to find a space for a month, you want to find a space for 6 months, whatever. That's really what we're talking about here.
And we're talking about interior space, by the way, which is kind of interesting, just as a quick note, Michelle. When we started the toolkit development process, we were always talking about interior space, and then we had a pandemic, and now all kinds of things can happen outside. And what Fairfax County does have is a permitting process for temporary outdoor projects. That's something separate. We're not talking about that today.
Right.
We're talking about popping up inside, as we kind of like to joke, an old shoe store.
Right.
Or the GameStop, actually.
Right.
Sort of our example is the vacant GameStop.
Right.
You want to pop up in the vacant GameStop. How do you make that happen?
Right. So there's a process for it. You need to figure out what use classification you are we will be talking about this. Think of this as the agenda, right? This is the 7-step process. We will talk about this more at length through this presentation. So if you have no idea what use classification means, trust me, in a few minutes, you will. 2, what zones allow that use classification. Again, we will talk about what that means. How do you find properties that might fit within those 2 categories? How do you build a budget? Anne has already talked about that at length, so we won't be talking about that at length as much during this process, but obviously that's part of this process. You need to think about what your budget would be to renovate a space. You go through a lease negotiation period. Again, we've already talked about that process, so we won't be talking about that at length during this presentation, but it is still part of the process. You do need to renovate the space. We will talk about what that renovation entails, because
Less is more.
I almost want to use air quotes
Renovation.
when we're talking about renovation. And then you need to obtain a non-residential use permit, which usually we call a non-RUP. In Fairfax County, that is what a lot of people call an occupancy permit. If you're in DC or Maryland, everyone calls it an occupancy permit. In Fairfax County, they call it a non-residential use permit. But even on their own website, they say it's the same thing. So these are the things that we're going to be talking about today. What are the benefits of a pop-up space, an interim space, whatever you want to call it? You can do it quickly. Quickly is subjective. We will in my world, this is quickly. To build out a space, an office, a performance art space, an art gallery from kind of soup to nuts is a year-long process at minimum. So doing something within 3 months is quick. So this is
I think that's really important to emphasize, actually, and probably we should have put this in the PowerPoint. Quick, in our minds, is 3 months lead time.
Well, I didn't want to put this in the PowerPoint because, again, it's subjective.
You're right, but I want to manage our audience's expectations.
Correct.
And so when we say quick, we mean
3 months is quick.
2 to 3 months lead time to get a program up and running. And honestly, I can't imagine a really great arts program being planned in less than 3 months.
Well, because a lot of it is on them. It's how fast they find a property. It's how
Right.
It's not so much right.
But my point is, and back to the previous presentation where I talked about project leadership. So if you want to throw up an art gallery in 3 months, you probably need both the curator, artistic director, production team for that exhibit, and in a parallel track, a team of people working on getting the space produced, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine that it very typically can take a visual art organization or a performing art organization 3 months to produce a piece of artwork. You just have to know that you gotta be working the space game at the same time.
Right, but hopefully, this is not a surprise because people are working this into their schedule for upcoming year anyway.
So quick isn't next week.
Right. So that's why 3 months. Something,
2 to 3 months.
Cheaply also is relative, and legally not relative.
Right. Yeah.
I will in no way recommend you squatting in a space without a building, without a non-RUP in any way. It's just not a good idea. I'm just going to leave it at that. So what are some of the benefits? There's no building permit. You still need your non-RUP, your non-residential use permit. You just don't need a building permit. Building permits in Fairfax County can take, and if there's anybody here on from Fairfax County, it can take anywhere from 5 to 6 months. And that's just, they're very thorough.
Jennifer's nodding her head.
They're awesome.
Yeah. Well,
and awesome in both sense of the words. They're very thorough, and so they take quite some time. So
generally speaking, why would I need a building permit? Are you going to discuss that later?
Oh, I'm going to talk about that later.
Okay.
So yeah, for sure. So in this purpose, we're doing this so that you don't need a building permit legally and ethically. I'm not trying to like get you to skirt some laws here. Ethically, legally, don't need a building permit. And then also, as Ann said, this hopefully activates some excess vacant space that we have in Fairfax County. Throughout this presentation, I found a lot of vacant space on these maps, and so there's a lot out there. So hopefully you can start grabbing a little bit of it. Use classification. How do you find out what use classification you are? So we talked about this at length. I know Lisa sent out a survey of what the two kind of major categories of people who would be attending this presentation. They really kind of fell into visual arts and performance arts, right? Those kind of two categories. So there is a new zoning ordinance land use crosswalk. I don't know why it can't be shorter, but I'm just going to call that crosswalk from now on because I can't keep on talking about a new zoning ordinance land use crosswalk. And we have a link to it at the bottom. We do have hyperlinks in the presentation, but we'll make sure that they work. But if not, you can copy and paste the link at the bottom. Visual arts generally get lumped into commercial use, retail sales general. Performance spaces also get lumped into blah, 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 cultural facility or museum. We can talk a lot about this. Let's just kind of save this kind of to the end. This goes into a, now I have to figure out how to get to, how do I get to the link? Sorry, I'm used to using a Mac.
So now you get down here.
Sorry, everyone, I'm trying to basically access the link so you can see what we're talking about when I say I go to the crosswalk. Thanks. So the crosswalk looks like this, right? So this is where you will find out what you are. If you look at this entire page, you can see what Fairfax County is classifying all of the categories of space, right? So, but what we did was simplify into the two categories, right? We recognize you may not feel that you fit into those two categories. If you feel that you are unsure or you want some more information, you can call the Zoning Ordinance Administration Branch at this number and talk to them. I had many.
And they answer the phone.
They answer the phone. I had many conversations with Fairfax County through this process. I haven't called this number, but I did talk to Michele Hinkman at Fairfax County through the process, and they very much like to answer your questions. So should you talk to someone about, we don't know what classification we are, we recommend you avoid these terms, right? If you are performance art space, use that terminology. Don't use the terminology theater. When I called Fairfax County as kind of a dry run myself, I used the word theater. They thought I meant motion picture theater, like I was going to go see a Marvel movie, and they put me in a whole different category. Now,
well, they think of a theater as being larger.
Much larger, lots and lots of rows of seats.
And with all due respect to most of you guys, they're thinking about several hundred people, the traffic that comes with that, the other impacts of a large assembly use.
They're thinking of Wolf Trap or
when you say the
Atlas.
word theater.
Yeah. So,
and most of you are on a scale that does not equate to the county's definition of theater in terms of the zoning ordinance.
correct. But if you are thinking a 200 person, lots of rows of seats, then you are theater.
Correct.
Right. Again, we're trying to make this easy for you, but again, if you have
But I don't think any of us are putting 200 people in the same room together these days.
well, not as a pop-up. Again,
not as a pop-up,
right.
but not as a pandemic activity.
No.
Either,
I mean,
so yeah.
One of my clients, Washington Improv Theater, is having a big pause because they're having the same problem right now.
Right.
So, anyway, again, which is why we're trying to recommend you not use the word theater. You want to use performance space. You want to use the word rehearsal, things like that. Also, do not use the word restaurant unless you mean you're putting in a restaurant, which I would assume none of you here are putting in a pop-up restaurant. If you're using a prepackaged, you're putting in a little coffee bar, you're going to sell some prepackaged treats. You might be selling some coffee out of a
Candy and stuff
right.
from Costco.
Concessions, right?
Right.
We're doing something that, selling at a high school, whatever, concessions. Kitchen means something different to Fairfax County. They don't mean, it means a big hood and sprinkler system. You want to use a word like pantry, coffee bar, things like that. So these are just really things of terms to avoid. Again, if you have any questions.
To understand when you use these terms, why you get the answers that you get, and why you may need to, again, call them back and continue to talk in more detail.
And we were also going to recommend talking to Jennifer, and then she had a little.
She added into the chat, right?
So do you want to mention Jennifer?
Yes, well, Jennifer Josiah is with us today. She is with Fairfax County Land Development Services, and she's going to be in our Q&A in a little while.
Yeah, but Jennifer, we were planning on bringing you in as well as a liaison, so good segue. So zoning. So basically now you know what use classification you are. I want to have an art gallery pop up. Oh, well, I'm a visual arts. I now know that I'm retail sales, general, right? I now know what I am. Or I want to have a performance arts space dance. I now know that I'm a cultural facility and museum, right? I now know what I am. Now I need to go find what zone I'm in. And we have, now I'm going to need you again, Alex.
Hit escape.
Hit escape. So you can go to this link. I know it looks a bit of an eye test. We will have more information on this, but I wanted to just see what it looks like, right? You can scroll down. It's very long. It's a little bit complicated. Maybe I will go to these things later. We gave you a little blow up here. You will see that there are zones broken out into districts, and you will see things that have P's in them, they have SE's in them. What you need to focus on is just where the letter P is, which means allowed or allowed by right. They use the word permitted, but that might be confusing in the sense that you might think it means building permit, but in this case it means allowed. So you need to focus on where it says the letter P. So for example, cultural facility or museum, you can scroll over and you can see where it says P. You'll see that it's in districts C3 to C8. I'm hoping everyone understands that. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Right, and this is just one snapshot of the matrix of the table. The table is really large, and so the retail sales is in a different place. Indoor commercial recreation is the other one. Office use, specialized instruction center. Those are some of those 5 categories that are in the toolkit on page 14 that you might look for. The use classification is on the left.
Right.
The zone is across the top.
Right.
So you want to find the place where your use classification intersects with a zone with a P. Right.
Right. So the first thing you're doing is find out what use classification you are, right? So if you're visual arts, you're retail sales. If you're performance art space, you are most likely cultural facility or museum. If you don't feel that you're either, call the number we gave you or talk to Jennifer Josiah, right? Then you go to this chart and you look to where your use classification is on the left. Then you go to the right to see where the letters P are and see what commercial districts you are. I promise this will all make sense. Right now this might seem a little deep dive, but
go back to the previous slide. No, right there. So the other thing is that you can look in the table. Generally speaking, zone C5 to C8
is your sweet spot.
Is your sweet spot.
Right.
Right. Zone C3 and C4 can also be good.
Mm-hmm.
But generally you are looking for commercial districts that are zoned C3 to C8.
Right.
So even though those are two different use classifications, Michelle, we're still talking about generally the same set of zones.
Yeah,
Right. The
yeah.
same set of commercial district zones.
Yeah. And Jennifer mentioned, which is good, because I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but as Ann knows, I love getting into the weeds. But let's say we don't want to get into the weeds too much. They are all hot linked. So if you want to,
that's a great point.
if you, I just want to keep on, I don't know, again, retail sales general. If you want to hot link it, you can go in and you can see
The description.
the description of what it says.
of the use classification.
Of the use classification, exactly. So all of these are hot linked if you need to get in there to see what it says.
And again, page 14 of the toolkit lists the 5 use classifications that cover probably 99% of folks on this webinar who are doing arts uses.
Right. So this is a zoomed in snapshot. So you can see how.
There's our colors.
Yeah, I animated it. So you can see kind of how. So you can see kind of how you would zoom in and see where you are in the list, right? You target the zones you identified. So once you know what zones you are, then go find those spaces, right? You can do it the other way if you want. You can.
Yeah, don't go there, Michelle.
Yeah.
Figure out
Right.
what you are, then go look for properties in the zones that fit.
Yeah, this is the most efficient route, which is why we're teaching it this way. There's a lot of ways that people can find space, but this is really why we're trying to get you to kind of do this way smartly and efficiently and really cost effectively and quickly, right?
Right.
Again, you can always spend more time. We just don't necessarily want you to. So you need to target the zones you've identified. We will explain how that is. We are recommending very much that you try to find a space that's in relatively new condition that needs little or no renovation. Why, you may ask?
Again, for a pop-up, because I want to do this quick.
Right. Why, you may ask?
Why?
Why? Because if you have to remove walls, you are now renovating your space. That you'll need a building permit. If you are moving doors, you will need a building permit. If you need to
Yeah, but that comes later.
I know. I'm letting them know why they need to find a space that needs little or no renovation.
Right.
It just is a key point right here that if you walk into a space and you say, wow, this space needs a lot of work, that's not the space for you.
That's not the pop-up space for you.
That's the whole point of this presentation is
Right.
pop-up. Exactly. Once you find many spaces, because you should not just find one space. Once you find many spaces, get as much information about that space as possible. Get the landlord contact information. Many landlords will not contact you back. I don't know why, it just will happen. Find out if you can when the property was built and when it was renovated. If you can, get building plans, whether or not in paper form or electronic, if you can. And then find out what district the property is zoned for. We will explain how to get some of this information. How do you find out what the property is zoned for? You may want to use this map to help you target where to look. I have a link in the description and below. If we have time at the end of the presentation, we can open this one up. This is a bit of a beast of a map to load, so I specifically am not going to open this up. But you can see the targeted areas. You can see Tyson's, you can see Merrifield, right? You can see Annandale, you can see Springfield.
Which ones of those colors are C3 to C8, Michelle?
Excellent question, of which I will explain. You can see Fair Oaks, right? You can see all the areas that are very highly colorized. They correspond to this key map down here. The areas that you will be looking for, which are mostly going to be in the C3 to C8 range. Again, what Ann mentioned, mostly you're going to be looking in the C5 to C8 range, are a dark purple to a dark rusty red. If you are colorblind or not sensitive to colors, this is not the job for you. I showed this to my husband and he couldn't figure out the greens from the reds. So find someone else. But You are looking for the colors that are more in the dark purple to the dark reds area, which are the areas that I just highlighted, which correspond to Tyson's, Merrifield, Fair Oaks, Annandale, and so on and so forth.
The commercial district.
The commercial districts. This link down below, again, should we have more time, happy to blow up this map to show you. But this is a really good place for you to start. It is not the place for you to finish. The next place you go to, once that you have some areas that you think you might want to go to, maybe you don't want to go to Fair Oaks for whatever reason. You want to mostly target Tyson's for whatever reason. So then you can go to this map, the Zoning District Analyzer, again, linked down the bottom. You can zoom in on this map. Please be patient. There is a lot of information in this map. You can zoom in and it'll show you what it's color coded to the same map before, and it'll be labeled C5, C6, C7, and so on and so forth. So you'll actually be able to see the whole entire zone that something is zoned for, the commercial district that it is zoned for. Again, should we have more time at the end of this presentation, I can bring up
We can
this.
pretend, we can play.
Right, we can bring up this
But you'll
website.
but what I'm noticing, Michelle, is that just looking at this image that you have here, which, by the way, where is this? What is this image of?
Oh, this is Merrifield.
This is Merrifield. It's not the Mosaic District where we're sitting?
Mosaic is,
Okay.
No,
Anyways,
down here, yeah.
Sorry, that wasn't meant to be a stumper.
no,
So this is Merrifield. So this is a commercial area that probably many of you are familiar with. And you notice, or what I notice, is that most of the squares are purple, pink, or red, right? So
Right.
if they're purple, pink, or red, that means that they are in that commercial range that I'm looking for.
Correct.
Right? So I got to avoid that green one in the middle.
yeah, green's
Yeah.
not for you.
Green's not for me.
Yellow's not for you.
Yellow's not for me, but
And-
you've circled a nice rosy, sort of dusty rose
Yeah.
one.
Well, I
And
think I
what's
took that slide out, so yeah.
what
it's not sure.
zone? What zone is that?
That is C5.
So that's C5.
Right.
So in a C5, I can do both visual arts or cultural facilities
That's correct.
and museum in that rosy red.
Right.
And I can do that in the purple as well, right?
Right. You will notice that basically retail sales general, they overlap both from C5 to C8.
Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And then we took out that slide, so we'll have to update the presentation. We do not have an area shown larger on next slide, so ignore that part. So once you have your use classification, once you know the zones that you are allowed to be in, remember they have a P in them, once you then go find multiple properties, you then need to make sure that the space that you find,
The property.
the property that you find, the properties have been used for that purpose, right? So the vacant space that you're looking at has to have been classified as retail sales. If you need it to be retail sales, it needs to be classified as retail sales. So it needs to have been a GameStop or a Payless, and we have some descriptions of that later. It needs to have been something that was retail. If you were looking at to be a performance art space, it needs to have been classified as a cultural facility and museum. It needs to have been already, again, this is for the pop-up option. So
Right.
it means
so
you
it could have also been for performing arts space. It could be classified as indoor commercial recreation as
yes. So yes, that is
well. Yeah, but the point is that they need that the zoning and the use classification have to correspond.
yes. They need to find a space that was already being used for that similar purpose. So they cannot find a gas station for the pop-up space.
For the quick and
quick and easy.
quick, cheap, and legal.
Right. So
has
it
to
need right.
Be conforming. That's the word I usually use. Is conforming. So it's not exactly. So you may not find something that was a art gallery before that you're going to make an art gallery now.
No, but it needs to have been
But
retail.
it needs to conform with the use classification, which is retail sales general.
Right.
Or it needs to conform with the use classification of cultural facility and museum or indoor commercial recreation to do it as a performing arts space.
Right.
Right?
Right. And Jennifer had a comment about not necessarily, I think that means, what, me talk louder?
I'm gonna scroll up
Oh, scroll.
on the chat.
Oh, I can see it.
Oh, well, maybe you can monitor the chat.
Not necessarily. Oh, she was answering a question in the chat for somebody.
Oh,
else.
okay, got it,
Thank
okay.
you, Jennifer.
So we know that this might sound a little confusing. Again, call number, talk to Jennifer. We're trying to simplify it, but we recognize that there's always exceptions, there's always possibilities. So we're trying to kind of be as simplified as possible, knowing that this is not a simple process. So it's easier for you just to kind of say, okay, I'm trying to find a visual art space to be an art gallery. I need to find other spaces that were already retail. I'm trying to find a performance art space, so I need to find a space that was already either a performance art space or a cultural facility space or an indoor recreation space. Once I find these spaces, I need to make sure that they were already conforming for this use and they're already in the zones of which that I'm allowed to be in. If they're neither of those two things, you shouldn't proceed. Once I have a bunch of spaces, I know my spaces, I've talked to my landlords, I've decided to either pursue a few spaces, maybe I've narrowed it down to a few, I'm gonna build a budget on those spaces because some may need more renovation than others, some may fit better, this one may need a little bit more work, but it doesn't quite meet exactly what you need. This one might meet exactly what you need, but it needs a little bit more work. So you're going to build a budget. We've talked about this already, and it's kind of went through this at length. So there's things that you can touch, hard costs, things that you can't touch, soft costs. This should be a much shorter process than if you were doing a full out, build out, but you still need to build a budget regardless. You're doing all right on time?
Mm-hmm.
You also will go through a lease negotiation period. It may be a shortened period, it may be a 1-page lease, maybe a 10-page lease, but you should still have a lease for this space.
Or a contract of some sort.
Some sort of agreement
In writing.
In writing for this space. We will never recommend it be a handshake. That's just
Put you at risk.
wouldn't do it. So whatever you want to call this, an agreement, a lease, a contract,
MOU,
whatever, you should have it. Once you design your space, you finalize your budget, you have some sort of agreement with your landlord, we definitely recommend that you ask the landlord for the previous non-RUP, the previous non-residential use permit that was used on the space. One, it verifies that that space was built out to code previously, so it's good insurance. It kind of lets you know that the space was permitted before.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't,
Okay.
might be a trigger. I just want to say it might be a trigger.
It just provides a lot of helpful information.
But two, it provides a lot of helpful information of which that you will need later, for sure. So please ask for that. It'll be useful. If the non-RUP is not available, there's other things that you can ask for. You could ask for the permitted plans from the landlord. They'll have a whole bunch of information. Better yet, you get the whole plans from the landlord. The building information sheet contains square footages, the use group, a whole host of data that is needed for the non-RUP. If building plans are not available, you've hit a potential wall. There are ways for you to get it. There's websites that you might be able to get the information, but it's definitely.
Well, I think what you're trying to say
it's
is the quick, cheap way to get to a non-RUP is to have the information from
Already
the
available.
old non-RUP,
Yeah.
so that you can basically cut and paste.
Yeah, siphon
right?
it. Absolutely.
Right. So you're looking for a template
Yeah.
for your new non-RUP from the old non-RUP.
Yeah.
If you can't get to the old non-RUP, ideally there's this building information sheet,
Mm-hmm.
or you can get that information from the plans.
Mm-hmm.
You still can get a non-RUP even without those things. You're just going to be working to dig around to get all the information that the non-RUP requires.
Right, and you're no longer now doing this as fast as you wanted to. You're adding time. Right.
to your process. Right.
The non-RUP is available on FIDO, issued after 2007 as well. That's correct. That's one of the things that we were planning on discuss if we had more time.
There's
right.
there's an online database of formal non-RUPS that
Right.
goes back to 2007. And Jennifer put the link to that in the chat. So if your landlord is responsive and ready to give you a lease, but for whatever reason is useless in terms of previous
Right.
occupants' information, you may be able to find that info
Right.
online in the Fairfax County's
Right.
FIDO database.
Right, but I searched for a bunch of non-RUPS on spaces that I knew of, and I couldn't find them. So it's not as user-friendly as one would think. Let's just say. Okay, so after you've gone through the lease negotiations, gotten as much information as you can, you will then, now that you are about to start work on this project, you are going to renovate the space,
But not.
but not. You're not really renovating the space as you would be if you were getting a building permit. You are cosmetically renovating the space. You cannot move walls, you cannot demolish walls, you cannot move doors, you cannot add doors, you cannot do anything that would modify the egress of the space, because that egress has already been approved for that use, for that space. You can change the paint, you can change the flooring, you can, if the faucet is broken, you can change out the faucet. You don't like the sink, but the sink is in its current location, you can change out the sink. But if the space does not have an ADA compliant restroom stall, you cannot go into that space. You cannot add an ADA compliant restroom stall. You cannot decide to
Without a building permit.
without a building permit. That's not for that's not for this pop-up option. You cannot add an office. You cannot
You can't demise it, separate an open space into smaller spaces.
if you can't, with your own office staff, over a course of a weekend, with the materials that you can find at Home Depot, not drywall, cosmetically just change the look of the space, but not add new walls, demolish walls, add new doors, demolish.
Right.
That basically, I hope everyone understands the word cosmetic. You can only change it cosmetically.
So if you walk in, so this is, part of your evaluation of properties from the beginning, which is any property you visit that quote unquote needs a lot of work is one you gotta check off your list in terms of the easy button.
So if you don't like a wall in a certain location, tough
Well, not tough, it means the property doesn't fit your needs
for the purposes of the.
for the purposes of
this,
a quick
right.
pop-up. Yeah.
Right.
So again, what we've explained isn't exhaustive. Michelle's got a link in here to Fairfax County informing you on what requires a building permit. Again, we sort of think about it as in, if she and I can go to Home Depot and do it, you can do it without a building permit. If
Right.
we need somebody with a license to do it, it probably needs a building permit.
Right. You can patch a hole in a wall, you can change out the flooring, but you pretty much can only cosmetically change it. There is a list of what you can and cannot do without a building permit here. And again, should we have more time, we can go through all of these links. But I think we're being hopefully very clear on what is legally allowed to be done without a building permit.
Can you tell this piece is important?
This piece is important.
This piece
Yeah.
is really important.
Because someone from Fairfax County, bringing me to the next slide, once you are done with your renovations, but not renovations, you will file for your own non-residential use permit. Again, your occupancy permit, which is again why you would want to have some of this information already, so you're not recreating this. Someone from Fairfax County will be coming to your space and looking to make sure that the space is being used the way that you are certifying that it's being used. And so they will
It's
make
called
sure.
an inspection, right, Michelle?
It's an inspection, right. They are certifying that it is ready for occupancy. So they will be making sure walls weren't changed, doors weren't changed, right, things like that. And so they'll catch you. So if you've changed something from the previous space, they'll know it.
Right, and I guess what maybe we ought to make sure is clear here is filing for the non-RUP is the last step in our list, but getting the non-RUP requires an inspection and a certification. You don't just file it, you file it, then you get inspected, then the county comes back and says congratulations, and
You can move in.
and sends you a PDF probably that you can print out
Yes.
and have on hand, so that you know that you have legal occupancy. And some landlords may require seeing that,
Oh, they want a copy of it, which is why you get it.
why you get it from the
From
last
the
guy,
previous
from
tenant,
the,
right.
from the GameStop that was in before.
Right.
Your landlord should ask to see that non-RUP before you open.
Right.
You cannot open for business. You cannot have members of the public inside that space without
And approved.
an approved
Non-RUP.
non-RUP.
So typically, this non-RUP process per Fairfax County takes 2 to 5 business days. In my experience, it takes 2 weeks. So
Give yourself some breathing room.
yeah, I always recommend a client to allow for 2 weeks.
But that's pretty quick.
I think it's pretty quick, but because you need to file it, they need to schedule the inspection,
Right.
then they go back, and then they issue it. So it might take them
2 to
2 to
5
5 weeks, but
2 to 5 days.
2 to 5 days. It takes 2 weeks. So then I believe that is it.
Yeah, so that is the pop-up process. Now what I'd love to do is have Jennifer jump in and unmute herself, and open it up to questions to talk about that process.
Sure.
Hey, Jennifer. So correct me, why don't you, while we're waiting for people to do some questions, I think of you as an ambassador. Is that a good way to classify you? Tell people what you aspire to accomplish in your role for Fairfax County.
Sure. So, do you want to mute someone back there? Okay. So I'm a project manager in Fairfax County Land Development Services, and I specialize in nonprofits. But my experience is I did work in zoning for several years as an senior assistant to the zoning administrator. And now I work in land development services where we issue all of the permits. So I have a wide view of the entire development process and can help guide people through that process from all the way from concept through occupancy, and then even beyond occupancy if there are special events or things that need additional permitting. So I can offer people what's called pre-application meetings if you have something that's complicated and you need to go through a zoning process. I can help you with that. I can get all of the right people in from all of the different agencies that may need to review your application. But that's not in the pop-up section. That's not the easy one. That's the complicated, long process where you plan to be there for a while. But anytime you find a property, if you have a question about it, feel free to call me or email me, and I can answer any questions you may have. If it's, if your use is maybe a little questionable, I can guide you towards zoning so that you can get the right determination. If you're wondering about the building use group classification for that space, I can do a little research. I can find out for you. If you need the old non-RUP, there are lots of different databases that are actually in the toolkit that you can utilize. But if you're having a problem finding it, feel free to reach out to me and I can find that for you.
Awesome. So, you're willing to be a little bit research assistant, a little bit ambassador. Can you help me find vacant buildings? Can you make suggestions?
That I actually can't do. No. you mentioned earlier is, involving these district supervisor's office. So if you have a specific area like Richmond Highway that you want to go to, talk to Supervisor Lusk's office, or maybe even if you're looking into Annandale, go to Supervisor Gross's office and talk to their land use aide. They may actually be aware of vacant properties that, they may be trying to activate. They may be trying to get your type of use into. So they're a really good partner. And also, if you have to if you're going through a complicated process, it's also good to get them involved so that you can get their support through that approval process. But no, I don't have a database of vacant properties, and I can't help you find a property. But once you do find a property, then you can come to me.
But at least being able to also point in the right direction is a
Right,
valuable resource.
But so I sort of envision that an arts organization might be sitting with their board members or their staff having a brainstorming session. I mean, I'm really familiar with this, and your board members are like, well, you know what you should do? You should put something in the old GameStop in the Pickett Shopping Center. And so brainstorm that list, do a little research on your own, and then call Jennifer with a short list of 5 or 6 properties. And it sounds like you can help weed out and fine tune that list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do this. Yeah, that's what I do with nonprofits. So I do this with a lot of places of worship, different types of, food banks, all different types of nonprofits. So absolutely, I can help you with that.
Lisa says that on page 8 also is a list of other people who can help find vacant space.
Yeah, I
In the toolkit.
I think that finding the space is some of the most daunting part of the process. Finding I know that also on that list there, we talked to, over the past 2 years, we talked to lots of developers and landlords who were actually very enthusiastic about working with arts organizations. So sometimes you have if you have the benefit of an enthusiastic landlord, he or she can help streamline that permitting process because that's their business. Mm-hmm. They do that every day. Mm-hmm. So an enthusiastic landlord, back to like good relationships, are really valuable. Enthusiastic landlord can really help you because they have experience in the permitting process. They have talented professionals, architects, engineers, etc. And sometimes they even have a little bit of TIs mm-hmm. to share. Tenant
improvement
with their tenant to help get it up and running. Then you should know, then they may be looking for something out of you, which is you doing a lot of legwork in the marketing, you building social media and visibility, etc. In fact, again, we've talked to a lot of landlords over the past couple of years, and the smart ones all knew that arts organizations could be great partners in building foot traffic and building visibility for their building, their commercial district, their development project, etc. You can be a real asset to that landlord, and you should think of yourself as such, not as a charity case, but as an asset, and then present yourself that way to a potential landlord. This is what we're willing to do, and be very clear about what you need help with. Mm-hmm. Because again, they're the development professional, you're the arts producer.
In theory, we're gonna take another break, and then have a question and answer period, possible case study. I don't know if.
Right, so what we have planned is we have about another hour, and again, we wanted to open it up to the group, to the participants to ask questions about specific projects that you have in mind, or
I mean, this would be a good way to say, oh, I'm this organization and we're looking for this area. I mean, that we might get in the weeds,
Yeah.
but if anybody has any questions, this would be a good time to
and if
prepare
you
for it.
and if you don't, we have a sort of a case study. If we don't have a lot of questions, we have a
I'll just like a one pager. That one. Tiny.
We have a wee case study where we can talk about an example and use that to walk through this process in real time with a particular property in mind and a particular arts activity in mind. So,
Just to kind of show the websites.
did I see the makerspace question? Makerspace.
Question is from Kate. She wanted to know if we touched on maker spaces, unused warehouse retail space to use as a community studio for ceramics and glass.
Okay. To me, that's not a pop-up.
Yeah.
That's not a pop-up. But that being said,
We can chat about that and talk about that during the question and answer if we like.
okay.
I mean,
We're gonna go ahead and take that break. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
I have to take a break.
Michelle needs a bio break. Okay, so it is 12:03. We will start again at 12:13. Go grab some more caffeine. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Are we both in the shot?
Yeah.
Hi again. Okay, so Michelle,
Yeah.
you good?
Maybe with some food in my teeth, but yeah. You'll let me know.
Okay, so we did. We're gonna go ahead and start Q&A now. And this section of the webinar will be as good as you help us make it. So please try to
Ask us questions.
stump the women of the morning here, please. I am going to start with that makerspace question, and Jennifer, I'm going to ask you. So I've called you because I would like to create a makerspace. What use classification would that fall under, and what zones can I do that in? Michelle talked a lot about C3 to C8. Can I do a makerspace in a commercial zone?
Yeah. Yes. In some cases you can. You still have the echoes. Okay. In some cases you can, and you can also, it widens it out to industrial districts as well. So the area that you can look for space may be expanded. And it depends on what you're doing. You know, you're going to want to look at ventilation. If you're doing soldering or if you're doing cooking or something like that as in your makerspace, you're going to have all of the appropriate plumbing, electrical, and ventilation, mechanical, to make sure that everything meets code and is safe. But yes, there are different spaces, and it depends on the square footage of your space as to how you fit into the zoning ordinance. Even breweries, microbreweries fall into the category of a makerspace. And there, we do have in the Department of Planning and Development, there are people who will actually guide you through that process. And they can, I believe that that's located at the end of the toolkit as well, as a contact. So it's the Department of, I'm sorry, they just changed their name. They were OCR, which was the Office of Commercial Revitalization, but I believe it's Commercial Revitalization Services now. So they should be able to help you with that process and guide you through, but I can also assist with that as well. But maker spaces are definitely something that we want to encourage. We do have the Made in Fairfax program that's out there. And so if you're interested in entering that program, becoming one of the members, that would be great. We do have a Made in Fairfax page on the website. So all you have to do is go to fairfaxcounty.gov, search for Made in Fairfax, and you'll find that.
So Jennifer was referring to page 19 of the toolkit has important contacts, and in the top, in the first section, I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet point is commercial revitalization section, and their email and phone number is listed there. So you can call them directly. Also listed there is the Made in Fairfax email, madeinfairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, there's a classification called small scale production. Can you tell people, we didn't talk about that classification. Would you mind giving people a sense of what that use classification is meant for, and what zones that works in?
Yeah. Yes. Can you mute again? Okay, thanks. So the small scale production is a use that we created to fit types of like arts programs that don't need large industrial spaces. So examples would be maybe vertical farming. And also, you know, like a peanut butter factory where it's a small factory and maybe they're only using about 3,000 square feet. Or a space where an artist does textile art, and they're creating, you know, they have a loom and they're creating, you know, types of rugs or things like that. That would fall into the small scale production. And it's based on the zoning district. In terms of how much space you're using, I think it's like up to 8,000 square feet goes in the, can be allowed by right in the commercial districts. Once you get above about 10,000 square feet, then you fall into actual production and processing, which is an industrial use. And then that's in the higher industrial areas. But the lower industrial districts, which are the I1, I2, I3, those are the ones that have the small scale production as well. And some of those spaces may be less expensive to rent than the commercial spaces.
And so tell me, where generally do I find industrial zones in Fairfax County? Are there a couple of key nodes? Are they throughout the county? I mean, I noticed when we when we were looking at the land use map, the big wall map, there do seem to be black, which is industrial, right? There seem to be black zones integrated throughout most of the commercial nodes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they are. They tend to go hand in hand, and they tend to be along major roadways. So, you want to stay away from the higher number, I-5, I-6. Those are the heavy industrial. Those are, where they have cement processing plants and things like that. But the lower industrial districts actually have office parks. Or, some of in Chantilly, there's a large park, industrial park, where they have all different types of uses in there. A few years ago, maybe about 15 years ago, a lot of the industrial spaces were starting to be used by the bouncy house type, groups. And so that's indoor recreation. And that's also something that's used that can be allowed in the lower level industrial parks. But yeah, they're all along throughout the county, like I said, along the major roadways. And they're usually associated with the commercial areas as well.
There's a pop-up that I want to do. I want to take an old Pump It Up and turn it into a performance arts studio. Do you think you can do that with me?
That could be awesome.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in industrial spaces
yeah.
with bouncy houses.
Trampoline parks. Yeah, I'm too young. Yeah, too much time.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. So folks, what other questions do you have? And again, you can direct questions to me, to Michelle, Jennifer, so we can give you the county perspective, we can give you design perspective.
I saw a question about housing, but I don't think that's really for today.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up. So housing is not an interim use, obviously, or maybe not so obviously. In general, when we think of artist housing, we're thinking of permanent, affordable housing. As artist housing, in my mind, is a subset of permanent, affordable housing. That is developing housing is really not. The toolkit didn't anticipate housing development. The toolkit was really focused on commercial, industrial development for organizations using it commercially versus using it residentially. Mm-hmm. Residential development for artists and their families is one of the issues that's near and dear to my heart. Michelle knows that. Mm-hmm. I've worked on a number of artist housing projects over the past couple of decades. That's really a topic that I would encourage you to bring up to your elected officials, to remind ArtsFairfax about, to call the county. And
I would want to work on that project in Fairfax County.
Definitely. But this toolkit is really about commercial space, not residential space.
Right. Did we answer the question about makerspace? I know we answered a question about makerspace, but did we answer the question about makerspace with the person who asked it?
All right, I am going to assume that we did.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
Kind of.
Kind of. Kay,
feel free, Kay. Would you like to unmute and put us to the test?
Hammer away, man.
Hi. My name is Shri Thomas. I don't know why I'm going. I do recycling for art. And I would like to know if a pop-up, a backyard pop-up would be considered. Like having a backyard space as a pop-up.
Backyard of your house?
Yes.
Ooh, that would be in a residential zone.
Okay, so you live in a residential zone, and so technically doing commercial activity in your backyard is
I mean, I think that would really fall under your homeowner's insurance. I mean, I am not a lawyer, and nor do I want to play one on TV. But as an artist that operates a studio in my house, I do know that having people come over to look at my work in my house falls under my homeowner's insurance. So I would, are we getting a, what?
I was just saying, look up at
I'm
the
sorry,
camera.
I'm looking at myself and not the camera. So, right, I think that really falls more into your kind of homeowner's insurance. But if you want to have a space that shows your work, do we want to talk about that, or what's making it be at your house?
Because it's recycling to recreate art. And what I do is I teach people how to make eco bricks.
And you teach people how to make what?
Eco bricks.
Eco brick.
So, like,
Tell me what's
Eco
eco.
brick. Eco bricks is single-use plastic. Single-use plastic bottles that are thrown, and a lot of people don't know how to throw away single-use plastic bottles because they cap it. And when they cap it, the recycling people don't accept it because it cannot be crushed with the air inside it. So the cap has to be separated from I know I'm going into details, but
right.
You're teaching me something. Thank you. So what happens in your backyard is really, your liability, your risk, your calculated risk you want to take on. In general, commercial activities aren't permitted in residential zones, but you can, like Michelle said, you can, so many of us are working from home now. There are informal ways that you can activate your home for commercial activities, and really the risk is whether you're negatively impacting your neighbors, and your neighbors, call to complain.
Well, it's also through your business license through Fairfax County. Again, if someone has a business license through Fairfax County, it's clear about how you can operate through your home. Again, not wanting to be a lawyer, just by, again,
Yeah.
but I'm an artist, I have a business license, whatever. So however, we're happy to talk to you about how you can do a pop-up in a commercial district and show people how you could do that in a commercial space, but in your own home or your own home backyard, that really, I would say, falls under your business license through Fairfax County and your own homeowner's insurance, but I don't know.
I would say, Jennifer, do you have anything you want to add
Yeah, I
to
was going to
this?
say the same thing with Jennifer.
Yeah, can you guys mute? Yeah. So there is a home-based business use in the zoning ordinance, and you can do art classes. It's an administrative permit that you get from the zoning administrator, and it's got limitations as to how many people can come at a certain, at one time,
Right.
And limitations on the hours of operation and things like that. But yes, there absolutely is an ability to do that, but it has limitations.
It has to be what?
It's in the zoning ordinance. You can take a look at all the limitations on it.
Limitations. Okay.
Yeah. But it's a permit that you can get.
Okay. Thank you.
But again, I would highly recommend you looking at insurance. Not to plug ArtsFairfax, they don't work for them, but they had a marvelous series with Washington area lawyers for the arts over the pandemic that I had the opportunity to attend. And one of the things that they talked about was liability and having things at your house. So I highly recommend you making sure you've got insurance if you're going to have anything at your house.
So like commercial areas, what do you expect? I mean, which areas do you think I should be looking into? I'm in Fairfax County.
Question again?
Well, like we said, you want to look for commercial districts.
Yes.
So, it sounds like, actually,
Can I
Jennifer, if she wants to teach people how to make eco bricks, What use classification do you think that falls under?
So that would be a school of specialized education, I believe. And they just changed the name. The new zoning ordinance just went into effect July 1st. So they changed some of the names, so I don't know exactly what they are. But it's a school of specialized education, and those are permitted in all the C districts and in the lower industrial districts as well. So you can look in all of those types of districts.
Can we, Alex, can you put our screen up?
Ooh, and what was that called? I'm gonna do find them.
A school of specialized education, right, Jennifer? So what you can see now is we've gone to table 4101.1, the use table. And what Michelle did is she went and just searched on specialized. And as you can see, there we have specialized instruction. You want to click on that so we can see how it's defined. So, a center primarily devoted to giving instruction on vocational, professional, musical, dramatic, artistic, scientific, performing arts, and other special subjects. So basically, this is teaching people any sort of science and artisanal topics.
But it's no daycare.
But not daycare.
And then
right, it's
right.
not like a school, not like a daycare or a school. It's like a pottery studio or a painting school or a school where you learn to make eco bricks. And as you can see, that is permitted in all of the commercial districts, C1 through C8, as well as all of the industrial districts. So the good news, Shireen, right? That's your name? The good news is that is permitted pretty broadly throughout every commercial and industrial district. And so you could look for just about any commercial storefront could permit you to do that.
And residentially with that home, whatever.
And with a home-based business license.
And what Jennifer had mentioned with that special permit.
You can do that in your backyard.
Yeah. Which is everything.
And insurance.
And insurance, yes. Please get that insurance. All right, any other questions?
Ooh, I see a hand from the Reston Corral.
Hi.
I'm plugging my computer.
Okay, can you hear me? Hi, thanks. I have a question regarding permanent space and advocating for it. So it's not related to pop-up, so feel free to defer your response to the end because I really don't want to take away from other people's time. But we are, in Reston, we have a proffer by a developer for space to build a permanent performing arts center. And we're now in, I think, year 3 of a 4-year proffer.
4-year proffer.
Pardon?
Year 3 of a 4-year proffer in commercial space.
Yeah, for land to build this performing arts center. There has been a community-wide survey that has indicated public support for it. We've also surveyed performing arts groups in the region and they support the idea. But my gut feeling is that we need to be doing a lot more to advocate for this. And, I'm looking for some guidance or some thoughts on what we can do to help move this along so that time doesn't slip away from us and we lose this opportunity.
Okay, I would say Lisa, Miriam, or Linda, do you want to field this question to talk about what advocacy she should do?
Yes, I will. So I know that this is a project that has, people in Reston and the county are looking at. So there are people working on this. Where it stands, I'm not sure. But Susan, you're saying, you feel that it needs more advocacy, and so you're probably right, I'm sure. It's really the district supervisor that, you and others ought to make an appointment with to go sit down and talk about, where it stands, how much support there is in the community. It's just a little bit of, sort of pressure, on the district supervisor to see that, that person understands that the community is waiting for this, and ask questions and try to get answers. And, if they can't answer your questions, they'll put a staffer on getting the answer. But I do know, I'm not sure why it is, sort of so slowly going through this. It could be funding, could be, how is it going to be funded? Who's going to fund it? How much is it going to cost? It's a huge project. So my own experience with developing a new art center is that it took, 4 years in the planning before you ever stuck a shovel in the ground. So I'd say that your first step is the district supervisor's office, and repeatedly, like every few months.
Well, frankly, I think that 4 years for an arts center, to me, sounds quick. Yeah, so congratulations. Permanent real estate development is not for the faint of heart. It takes endurance and patience,
Guts.
and continued diligence to recruit new advocates and new resources and new energy, because it's really easy after being in year 3, you're feeling a little drained, and you need to go re-energize the forces.
Yeah.
Okay, so other questions?
About permanent or pop-up / interim or other? Hopes, dreams, aspirations?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you want to pull up that one-page case study?
Yeah. So our hope was to try to find a space to walk through with you, to show you kind of a real life, but things being what they were, we couldn't find one, and so I live in.
That's not what you meant. We didn't pull it all together.
We didn't put it all together, landlords. But I live in Fairfax County myself. I'm actually not that far away from ArtsFairfax, and so you've heard us talk about GameStop because I live near the Trader Joe's. That's at Pickett, and so let me find a little F5. So we wanted to kind of give you all the way down to the bottom again.
Shift F5.
I did.
Bottom right-hand corner.
I like Macs. Oh my God, it keeps on doing this.
Shift F5.
Why did I have to hit shift? I didn't hit it before. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we have a little quick case study. Zada Studio, that's me. Zada Studio wants a pop-up gallery to showcase local Fairfax printmakers. Art galleries are classified as retail sales general. We've already talked about that at length. The use table for 101.1 indicates that art galleries are allowed in commercial district zone C5 through C8. Searching for vacant space, vacant retail spaces, I revealed a vacant GameStop in Fairfax County near Trader Joe's, because I go to Trader Joe's all the time, in the Pickett Shopping Center. Both the zoning district analyzer and the real estate assessment sitemap indicated that the property is zoned C6. Proceeded to contact the landlord. What I'm going to show you is basically these things in the tools so that you can see what I'm talking about. So in this table, please be careful using the search tool. There are two distinct tables in this one web page. And Jennifer, if there's any suggestion I could give to Fairfax County, would be to separate these into two web pages, because there's 4101.1 and 4101.2. So if you just kind of did some happy scrolling, you could scroll down and scroll to the wrong table. But if you do a little search, you will see retail sales general, which is what Zada Studio would like to be for a little pop-up. And if you click that, you will see its description says, an establishment where the primary occupation is the sale or rental of goods or merchandise to the general public for personal household consumption. Yeah, keeps on going, right? This use includes grocery stores, drugstores, pet stores, photographic and portrait studios, specialty, gourmet food stores, keeps on going forever, right? So basically what this means...
Any store.
Any store. I could find a bookstore and turn it into a pop-up. I could find an old Payless and turn it into a pop-up. I could find a GameStop and turn it into a pop-up, as long as it sold something. We were joking earlier, lots of things. It could be a CVS. It could have been, as long as it sold something, more or less, it could be turned into an art gallery, right? So it does not have to have been an art gallery. And that's one of the things that Anne was trying to mention before. It's the conformed use.
It's conforming, right? It's not exactly, it's conforming.
Right, which is what the really important things we're trying to mention, is it doesn't have to have been that exactly, right? So I want to find something that has sold something. I have now found a GameStop. It sold something, right? So I know what I'm trying to find. So now I went to that big map that I told you that don't be if you're a little colorblind, right? This is the zoning map, right? We were talking about this earlier where Anne was mentioning things that were in black. These are industrial zones. You can see
The gray to black is
right. So you can
not white,
you
but
can
gray to black.
Right. You can see this key, right? Most of the zones that you're going to be looking at will be this color key. This is residential. These are planned districts, which you're really not going to be focusing on for the purposes of a pop-up, right? Industrial use, you may be looking at, again, you can call Jennifer and say, hey, this is what I think I'm going to be. Help me try to, not find it, but do you think this is what I can try to look for? And you can search for it, right? We know that for the most part, you're going to be somewhere in the C5 to C8 area, right? So I looked at this map, right? I kind of zoned in. You can see very quickly, if you were familiar with Fairfax County, as I hope you are, right? You'll notice certain areas are zoned out. City of Fairfax is zoned out. City of Vienna is zoned out. These things are not...
What she means is it's white,
right?
Because they aren't part of the Fairfax County zoning ordinance, because they have a separate jurisdiction and a separate oversight of their activities. So for the purposes of this workshop and the toolkit, we
are not addressing.
We're not addressing those jurisdictions, which are islands within your county.
Right. But because I live in an area called Mantua, I am now completely lost where I am on the map. I know that funnily enough, that part of my area that I live near is a little bit in Fairfax City and Fairfax County. Anyway, so I found where I'm going. I know, we're working on this. So anyway, I know where I was looking for myself on the map. This is the large map. If you can see my cursor, you can see this is Fairfax City here, and this is the GameStop area in Pickett, right in this little area. Now, I'm zooming in to the zoning district analyzer. I just already zoomed in because I wanted you to see what it looked like. The GameStop. So if anybody's familiar with Pickett Shopping Center, this is the Trader Joe's. This is the Total Wine. The Chuck E. Cheese is over here. AAA is over. I live here, so this is why I know it. GameStop is over here. You can see this area is zoned for C6, right? So it says it on the map itself what commercial zone it is. Be patient when you use this map. There's a lot of information, so it takes quite some time.
So can we look on Fido and get to the non-RUP to see, for instance, what the...
I didn't open that link, but yeah.
Well, so for instance, now that she's found, keep going. You keep
That's it, yeah.
no, you pull up Fido,
Okay.
even if it messes up our camera and makes our cameraman worried. So what I'm asking her now is, so she's found something that's zoned.
I've never looked, by the way, for it, so.
Oh, to me, the zoning is the easy part. What's hard then is finding the non-RUP and making sure your use is conforming. So that GameStop, for instance, had an occupancy load, right? Like they had, as part of their non-RUP, it tells you how many people are allowed to be in the store, for instance, on any given moment. And that's one of the conforming elements that for a pop-up you need to make sure is in line with your new non-RUP. So we may or may not be able to find this really quick, but my point is that a lot of times stores have certificates of occupancy for 49 or less. That's kind of a critical cutoff before you need more egress, more fire suppression, more life safety tactics in place. So it's important to make sure that the previous non-RUP or occupancy permit conforms to your new occupancy permit. And one of the key elements in that conformity is the occupancy load. Because for instance, if Michelle wants to do her printmaker open house, her printmaker exhibition, and she has an opening reception for it, and she invites a bunch of people, and everybody's vaccinated and they're all fired up to get out of their houses, and she's serving really great wine that she's bought from Trader Joe's, and she has 150 people show up, that may be non-compliant,
Right.
and therefore present a life safety risk.
I'm trying to find the
And I'm trying to
non-RUP.
get on this. So again, she's looking for it, and I apologize because I sort of gave her a question on the fly. But again, finding the previous non-RUP helps you understand what parameters your activity needs to operate within.
Right. I do have what is on a non-RUP, even though I don't have the GameStop's non-RUP.
Got it. Ooh, and look, it's $70. There's a nice piece of information.
So, while I'm still looking for the actual GameStop non-RUP, if you could share the screen, this is what an actual non-RUP looks like. Obviously not filled out, but this is the kind of information that you will eventually need. Yeah, and it's $70, so obviously put that in your budget. Soft cost. So business name, what the business name is. This is sometimes why you may not be able to find it. GameStop is owned by
Something else.
it used to be, yeah,
Right.
something
right.
else. So now I'll have to because it was owned by, I can't remember. So the address, the suite number, proposed use, the building permit number if applicable, obviously zoning case.
By the way, go back up.
Yeah.
In that proposed use, describe products, merchandise, and services you will provide. This is again where the existing non-RUP is really helpful, because the existing non-RUP will tell you what what was approved before.
Right, you'll see
And
the
so
terminology.
you should try, right, so you have that previous terminology, and for the purposes of a pop-up and to get a quick approval, you want your description to be as close to the previous description as it can be.
Right.
Not taking liberties with the truth, but looking at that as a guide so that you think about your pop-up use in the same terms that the previously approved use
Right.
was.
And then it has a lot of other information. So while I typically don't look up non-RUPS because that's something that my client is filing on their own, Jennifer Josiah, working for Fairfax County and being more of a zoning specialist than I am, certainly might be able to help you find this if it exists. The landlord should hopefully be able to have this information, but this is the kind of information that you will definitely need to provide, which is why it's always helpful to get it from the old one from the previous tenant. So that was basically just I wanted you to. I know we kind of obliquely said this website does this and this website does this, and then this is kind of a esoteric kind of zoning map that shows all these kind of color codes, and you can see why it takes quite some time kind of loading information. But when you zoom in and zoom out, this will give you the information that you need as far as what districts are zoned for what numbers.
Right. But I really want to, what I was trying to do is keep us, we've spent a lot of time on zoning, and I don't want to send a message that zoning is the complicating issue here. It's really not. It's really not. What's the complicating issue is, can I find a space that I can afford that has the existing characteristics that I need to support the activity that I want to do? So, for instance, if I walk into that GameStop, Michelle, and my visual art exhibit notices that a GameStop, if I remember correctly, because I know I've been in one, has some fixtures that maybe had, fixtures all along the wall that had video game boxes, those DVD boxes hanging on the wall. And I need to take those game box fixtures down so that I can repaint the wall and put up a hanging system for my prints. Am I allowed to do that without a building permit?
Yeah, so the way that the building permit works is that anything that is built into the floor, anything that's fixed in the sense that's walls, if it's millwork that is affixed to the floor, not necessarily, not furniture that might be big and permanent. So shoe stores, GameStop, things, bookcases, things that basically are just kind of heavy, but are not necessarily permanently fixed to the floor. They are allowed to be removed. They're not part of the egress or the occupancy calculations.
What is furniture?
What is furniture?
I can move furniture.
Can be removed. Walls cannot be removed.
So if I wanted to add more walls, because that GameStop is kind of wide
add
open,
walls. You can't
and
add
I
walls.
want to break it up and put some walls in
Cannot
it, so
add walls.
Okay.
Cannot
What could I do instead?
You could add furniture.
I could add furniture that I could hang prints from.
Yeah, you can add temporary furniture.
So I could buy like partitions from IKEA. Remember we bought partitions from IKEA once?
Yeah,
about 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they're not permanent, as long as they're not meant to be walls, right? You're not allowed to kind of fake it, right? You're not allowed to basically. Well, there are movable, non-permanent walls, but they're meant to look, feel, and act like walls. That's faking the system, right? They need to be movable, temporary walls. You still need to be able to see where the door is beyond, right? You're not allowed to obstruct the door. You're not allowed to be able to.
I think that's a great point.
Right.
Visual obstruction of egress is a really important item. And so anything that you want to add to the space that obstructs the view to the exits is a no-no.
Right, which is why when you go into a retail space, for the most part, right, when you go shopping, you can almost always see how to get out.
Mm-hmm. So
Almost
you need to
always.
be able to see.
Right, so when you go into a space, you need to be able to almost always see how to get out. So you
Okay.
Right.
So that GameStop had kind of like this room. It had a drop ceiling with some fluorescent lights. That is not what I want for my visual art exhibit.
Mhm.
What I want instead are, I'm gonna go to Home Depot and get some of those clamp lights that I can plug in and hang and highlight the artwork. Am I allowed to do that?
I really want to say no, because most likely they're going to be incandescent and they're going to kind of wreak havoc with your electrical wiring. You're kind of changing between. You're adding different capacity because incandescent kind of adds a higher capacity than fluorescent or LED. So, and this is starting to get really into the weeds. So
yeah,
right?
But I mean, I think a very common situation is that I find a vacant space with these fluorescent units in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And I want to say 90% of the arts production activities that people want to do, they don't want
Fluorescent, downlight.
fluorescent office downlighting.
You potentially could get an electrical subcontractor permit to make some modifications to the space legally and ethically. This starts getting into a completely allowed process, but then I feel like you're not necessarily in the easy button. You might be in the 4 to 5 months pop-up, not in the 2 to 3 months pop-up.
Great, so that's good to know. So if I need to change the lighting fixtures, I probably should give myself more cushion than the easy button.
Yeah.
2 to 3 month window allows.
Yeah, but see, and
Because then I wouldn't necessarily need a full-scale building permit, but I might need a subcontractor permit.
Yeah, you need what's called a trade permit. Again, the problem is they might look at the electrical panel. There's not enough space. I mean,
You're opening up a can of worms.
You're opening up a can of worms. Right.
Right. So, but see, that's what I'm trying to give people a sense of.
Yeah.
So, again, the activity you want to do needs to conform with the previous activity, and one of the ways it conforms is it uses the electricity in the same way that the electricity was used before.
Right.
Right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for the most part.
So if you want to use the electricity in a different way, then you'll need to investigate whether that's conforming or whether that requires a permit to make that change.
But that could also be part of your research process, is that you bring an electrician to the space. Once you've highlighted it, you've narrowed down to a certain property or two, you can bring an electrician to the space and say, okay, we want to replace a few of these lights with LED spotlights rather than incandescent spotlights, right? And do we have enough panel space? And can we pull a trades permit? How long would that take? And then kind of see what that process is and investigate that as part of your process.
And I hope some of you get, the reason I'm provoking her on this question is that I realize that...
Yeah, Jennifer's asking if you need to ask an architect if a permit is needed. I'm that person. That's why she's asking me. I'm the registered design professional. So yes, you can get a registered design professional, such as a contractor or an interior designer or an architect, to come visit the space. Contractor may or may not know. I would definitely ask an electrician, an architect, or an interior designer. I mean, definitely would ask a contractor if they're coming anyway, but for sure you might want to have a team come visit the space.
Well, or side note, board recruitment. If space is one of the key issues for your organization, your board development process should include people like Michele.
The team,
Look for people on your board that can provide the kind of expertise that you need right now, which in this instance might be getting someone on your board who is an interiors architect or an interior designer.
Right. But this is why when we're talking about the pop-up option or the easy option, we know it's a spectrum, right? So could you always do more? And yeah, but if you're hopefully trying to do something quick, easy, legally, as little as you have to do.
Yeah. But again, back to what I was going to say before is I realize that for a lot of arts organizations, electrical needs are one of the common issues, right?
For sure.
Whether it's
Lighting,
lighting for your visual art exhibit, lighting for your performance
Plugs in the
art
wall. Yeah.
activity, electrical needs of arts organizations are not always conforming with the electrical needs in a retail shop. So that's a potential bump in your road that you just need to be prepared for if you are very sensitive to how your space is going to be lit.
Right. Which is why we're recommending trying to find a space that's been somewhat recently renovated, because recent lighting codes in the past 10 years will hopefully have more LED lighting than fluorescent lighting and have more panel space. And again, that's a whole nother workshop, which we don't want to go into.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And Michelle, thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It is 1 o'clock and this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise.
well, I want to. Can I say thank you to Jennifer for being here to support us. Jennifer's participation really rounded it out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all. I hope that this has been helpful. And I wanted to say again that the recording will be posted on our website as well as the presentation. And Arts Fairfax wants to be a resource and support you as you seek vacant space to activate with the arts. So please reach out to me. My contact information is on our website, and you have it with the confirmation of today's program. And thank you so much for joining us. End the meeting now. Have a great weekend, everyone.